You're live. Welcome to another Account-Based Friday. We're a little bit later today because we've got a special guest joining us. You're not going to recognize his New York accent from Brooklyn because he's actually probably in Manhattan, and also because of his Irish accent from Ireland. David Quaid from Primary Position, who's the managing partner. Really excited to have David here. Each week we open up with a poll. This week we ask a question of where are you focused in terms of your target market and your energies and efforts. And I structured this a little bit differently. I actually said, let me see the answer. And it was really interesting that 20% of the people had selected that. But a majority of people in my network that responded to this were on the net new pipeline generation. A lot of activity there, even though it's been really, really challenging for some companies, SaaS companies and MarTech in particular. Still a lot of focus on net new generation. I don't know, Meg, did you have any reaction to this poll?
I voted number 2. And so I guess I'm in the slight minority, but the reason I picked 2 is because I feel like, in general, there's always a lot at the top of the funnel. There's a lot of opportunity. Maybe that's just indicative of the target market that I'm trying to reach. But to me, converting more of the demand you create, especially if you are in a target account-based environment, you know who you need to get into pipe. The problem is making sure that they continue to progress through it and close. So I'll always worry more about more conversions than I will at the top of the funnel. If I'm in an account-based environment and I'm worried about the top of the funnel, that tells me I've got a whole other problem. So that's where I'd go. But David would be so interested. You're engaging with companies on things that help with all of the above. In particular, I would think at the top, but you can tell us if that's not true. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thrilled.
Of course. What's your take on our survey of the week?
It's so interesting to see the split. To me, 2 always follows after 1, right? The minute you fix number 1, you're straight into problem 2. And I think, and sometimes problem 2 is actually where executives really get worried. They're, okay, great, we're seeing lots of activity, but how do we know this is worthwhile? We're putting our BDR and our inside sales team on this. I think they're more concerned about the quality of leads coming in than just the quantity, especially in B2B tech, places like cybersecurity where a sale's worth $100,000. It's not a volume game, it's an accuracy game. And it's actually easier to fix number 1 than number 2. Number 2 is almost impossible to fix.
Interesting. From a search, from a pure search perspective, yeah. You're saying?
Huh. Absolutely. Especially when you follow all of Google's guidelines. If you do textbook perfect campaigns, you're going to end up with a lot of spam. And that's because Google likes to collect leads at the search frame. And in B2B, in complicated sales cycles, that doesn't make sense, that somebody can just Google something and become a lead straight from a Google form. And I think that's where you see a lot of bad quality coming in.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you spend a lot of time, I mean, you're kind of hinting toward it with Google. Obviously, you spend a lot of time in their algorithms and kind of understanding the change. AI has now suddenly entered the chat, and I would think it has some implication on SEO, but I'm not really clear what that implication would be. How would you frame that up in terms of how people should be thinking about AI with SEO, or should they be thinking about it?
We're going to find out. I don't think I have all the answers. I think I have as many questions as everyone else. And I think everyone's got questions. Where is it going to come in? Who are going to be the next players? Obviously, the first concerns are people going to be automated out, right? So it's kind of like factory jobs and robots and car manufacturing in the 80s and 90s. And now, and on certain forums, I've seen a lot of people come in, especially content writers, saying that they've just been laid off. Which I found surprising. I think it's too early to make knee-jerk reactions to all of the news that's coming out, but it's definitely going to have a big impact. I think there are so many questions being asked about analytics and what we should be doing and why we're doing them, that we kind of need AI tools to get us out. We just have to figure out how they're going to work for us. But also, I think it's so different to other product launches where it's no longer just one company. It's no longer just one product. It's not just one area. We're seeing this coming in. Photoshop have deployed a version of Photoshop where you can ask it to put, to hide out the background of images. And so it's impacting video, content, social media, idea generation, and it's been such a short time frame that we've seen so many things coming in. I think that it's going to be difficult from a point of view of can AI do searches better, right? Do we trust AI to summarize information for us? I've been playing a lot with Bard and ChatGPT on Bing. So if you want to get the real-time ChatGPT for free, all you have to do is launch Bing on Microsoft's own browser Edge. That will, the minute you do a search, it'll give you a chat bar. And in there, you can start chatting with it and either do a search or it'll use its language model to explain something to you. And it's difficult to work out where exactly it's drawing that from the results set. It's not working the same way as a normal search engine. And it probably will change the way SEOs add keywords to content. For example, you're more likely to ask AI for recommendation than you are a search engine, right? So for a search engine, if you were looking for, let's say, a CRM product, you would probably start with a search around CRM. Most people, when they go to AI, are saying, what's the best CRM? And early stages, we're seeing that it's just adding best to a search, right? So it's not very, very iteratively smart yet, but it probably will get there.
Gotcha.
And the second thing that I wanted to, that I've been thinking a lot about is how copywriting is being impacted on copywriters. And it doesn't make sense to sort of just say, look, we don't need copywriters anymore, right? Because we've got AI and it can generate content. And I'm curious as to what the quality of that content looks like. And I don't mean from, it being AI versus a human being, or that Google prefers human content versus AI content. I think if you look at how companies produce content, they describe problems and they describe solutions that solve those problems. But a lot of that's kept internally, right? I'm not going to write a blog post that goes into everything I think about SEO, but I can describe a problem and how I might tackle that, especially legacy problems, right? That are from 2 or 3 years ago and how we solved it. When you look at the content that's being developed by AI, it really has to look at the commonality of content. So if you've got somebody who's publishing something that's very thought leadership or very, something that people haven't thought about or done before, does AI exclude that because it's an outlier, or does it include it, right? So very difficult choices. Are we moving the decision-making around, and who? So those are kind of questions I think people are asking and have on top of mind.
Makes a lot of sense. And just thinking about some of my own AI searches, sometimes the accuracy is not quite there. And like I've even called out the AI ChatGPT. I subscribe to 4. I probably should be using the free one on Bart on Microsoft site, but it's very confident, but it confidently gave me the wrong answer, which is not helpful. And only because I knew the right answer, and when I called it out, it corrected itself. It confidently corrected itself. But I find that kind of fascinating. What kinds of as we think about the skills now that people have to have on SEO or search, and now this AI world, like what kind of skills do you feel like companies need to be hiring for or staffing for to meet this new world that they're in?
Good question. I think analytics is going to become more and more important. I think that marketing has been very visual based, and I think some of the metrics that we've been focused on are interesting, but not necessarily the ones that move the needle. And I think that's part and parcel of why Google's getting out of analytics, right? Which is happening at the same time. Because I don't think Google wants to be the arbitrator of what metrics are and what they mean to every organization. I think that's proven too difficult. So I think what we saw with search engine optimization in the first 20 years was a lot of reverse engineering. So you have a system, you know roughly how it works. Google are very cautious to talk about a lot of the important technical details of it. And so a lot of it becomes reverse engineering, which is a software engineering discipline. That's how the first BIOS chips were created. And so I think that you're going to see marketing having to continue to be on point, strong messaging, good look and feel. But now the data is going to become so important, because I think everyone is going to be able to upscale the delivery and professionalism of quality, right? So if you're producing video, you now can produce more video faster. So you can now invest more time in better quality. You, instead of working out resolutions and saving different formats, you can now spend more time on the crispness of your messaging and have AI do a lot of the technical stuff, right? And that technical stuff just exists because we've been working with very basic computer systems, right? Google is a very, very basic engine. And what I often find surprising people is that's what Google is saying. They're saying we're overestimating Google's capability. It's a very basic search engine with very little AI functionality. So it really is a big change for us. I think a lot of people think Google has more AI than it has. It has very little. Most of its AI is probably deployed in anti-spam, in detecting linked farms and linked networks. And I think that's going to be that's equally a challenge for AI. How does AI know how people have gotten into search results as well? I think that's going to be interesting. You were saying when you're chatting with AI chatbots, you can ask them how they arrived at that, which is very interesting. And obviously, from an SEO point of view, you've never been able to ask Google, how did you get to that result? Now you can. And I found in the last week, ChatGPT saying, conversation over, right? So I don't know if people are getting kind of cranky with it, but if I ask it more than twice, how did you pick this side over that side? It says, time to move on to a new conversation, and closes it. So I think that the engineers might be reacting to a lot of the stuff people are putting in. I heard that a lot of the engineers that work in Amazon in voice search and on Alexa have to occasionally deprogram a lot of what people speak into the system. If people getting angry or frustrated with Alexa, for example, puts unwanted content into the search vocabulary, right?
Yeah, I could totally see that.
I think it also
kind of humorous when you think about it with Alexa. Like, you could kind of yell at it and it doesn't yell back, or you should treat it with respect, but I'm sure people out there don't. Yeah, it is kind of, I hadn't thought about that use case.
Yeah, it's a strange one, because now engineers are reading comments that you wouldn't normally allow into a workforce, right? So it creates new issues, and I think AI is going to see that more and more, right?
I would guess it will probably go through some sort of evolution of kind of like the Gartner hype cycle. Like, we're on the hype high right now, but it eventually drops down in terms of when people start seeing the quality that comes out of it. They may question, is this thing as good as what everybody talks about? And then eventually the quality will improve, a year from now or whatever. But Meg, you just came off mute. You had a question.
Yeah, I mean, David, I'm thinking about, as a marketing leader, and I'm, launching a new website very, very soon, scarily soon. One of the things my team is starting to really get into is making sure that we are optimized for search on the new site. And I'm curious to know, as you think about the evolution of search, because to your point, AI doesn't replace search, it's different. And complementary. And I'm wondering, what's your advice to marketing leaders now in terms of the things they need to keep in mind, skills, tools, training, things to pay attention to? Any advice you'd offer?
I think it's much more important to figure out how things get in front of people than just what I want to say to people. I've always been far more interested in how did a video get to 300,000 views than the substance of the message. But that's my job, right? I'm helping get eyeballs onto something. And I think the real challenge is not what do I want to say, or how do I polish it, or how do I copy another brand, but how do I get my message up there? What did I do, and how can I scale it? And so my advice to companies has always been why overproduce, right? Why create a 6,000 page PDF document with a lot of heavy lift, with a lot of executive time reading, and never knowing if anyone's ever going to get there? Rather taking small pieces of information and seeing if you can get readers to that and building up from there. I think that there's a lot of pressure when we see how successful companies like Apple are, and they're so polished, but they have thousands of engineers working on tiny little parts, right? There's probably a team of 10 engineers just on the silent button. And so they can afford to do that. And in a sense, they need to do that, right? Because they have to be a global leader. And I don't think that it's worthwhile copying that. I think that's way too much overhead. I think if you're a small, lean marketing team, go with guerrilla tactics and work out how to get your message above them is far more important than anything else, than production quality. I think there are two ways that we measure things. We can measure things in, here's a process. I've got to write a script. I've got to get an animator. I've got to get a voice artist. I've got to get it in 4K. I need an advertising agency. Those are things that big companies do. At the end of the day, all they're trying to do is get someone to watch the video. If you can get someone to watch the video, it doesn't matter if there were 10 post-production teams and managing it. And I don't think that the recipient cares. I think if you buy a brand new iPhone for, $1,400, you're going to want it to work. You're going to want it to work seamlessly. You have different expectations. But if you're trying to solve a problem and your company brings something new to the table, I don't think the value is in how you packaged it. I think the value is in making sure people got to see it. And I think those are the skill sets that we need to help the producers of content to get their content out there.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. I really do think people sometimes get lost in the production value as opposed to the content value and the impact. And you see, I mean, how do people get famous on TikTok? It's not because they're huge companies producing stuff. It's because whatever they have to say means something to somebody. Or makes them laugh, whatever it may be, or makes them cringe, whatever. I guess that's the latest. But thank you. That's an incredibly important point. And I'll take that to heart as well. I'm interested to know, from your point of view, thinking about teams like mine where, we're always trying to learn how to improve our capabilities around search. What are the best ways for companies to engage with experts like you? What are the kinds of projects you think have the biggest impact?
And this may be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I think where the leadership team is keyword orientated, right? So keywords aren't random, right? Keywords are, we search with amazing in patterns. And so you can see keywords, for example, around cybersecurity, like risk management, that may have 70,000 searches a month just in the United States. So we're very patternistic because of how we're being educated. And I think that trying to figure out what keywords or what concepts your audience is looking for. Just remember that they may be self-educating. They may be trying to see, what are my peers thinking about? What are boards expecting from my position? And so as much as you can cover and uncover, and if the board knows, for example, this key phrase is important to us because people searching for that are ultimately looking for us, that helps you. So if your team is working on keywords and the board doesn't understand it, they're probably going to underinvest in SEO. And nearly all of the time that I meet companies that SEO isn't on their radar as their main source of lead generation, it's simply because they tried it, it didn't work, and they gave up. It's very, very hard to get started, but it should drive a ton of traffic. I think the SimilarWeb released some stats the other day. Google drives 8x the traffic of all social media platforms combined. So it's there. It's not for every industry, but it's there.
It'll be interesting to see if that shifts at all with AI in the future. Or
I think Microsoft announced they've just broken 100 million daily users, which is a huge change for them because that's been 20 years in the making.
Interesting. So do you see search then shifting? Like market share of search shifting from Google over to Microsoft because of AI, or?
Really, really good question. I think it's going to go by segment, right? So if you take companies that are very if you take people that are very technically capable, right? Software engineers, programmers, DevOps people, they will probably move to AI fastest because they can, it's just one step up from DevOps. They can automate a ton of things. But people will probably always use Google for basic stuff, right? If you're searching for a restaurant or you're searching for something, you don't have time for an AI conversation. I think it's additive. I don't think it's competitive. I think there are things that, look, there are things in Google search where if you start doing any kind of complicated search, it becomes terrible, right? It's not much better than doing Control F in a Google spreadsheet, right? And so I think after a 25, 26-year run, something's got to, I think we've got to get some better tools in, right?
Totally. I know we're pressing time here, and this has been a great conversation. Maybe before I ask Meg any closing thoughts, just one quick question. What's the number one, from my side, what's the number one issue that you're hearing clients talk with you about today that they're concerned about? I mean, obviously, Meg and I had our questions and our points of view, but what are you hearing from your clients right now as their number one concern?
Attribution. Where are my leads coming from? What data points they touch? I think so many data and analytics apps will tell you the last click. And I think a lot of marketers want to know how is content, how is activity helping those leads, and where are they getting the quality from? And I think that if anything, attribution has gotten worse. I think that companies like Google, Microsoft, they, where there's mystery, there's profit. And I think they're making it more difficult. And so I think everyone wants to get a better handle on data, especially for attribution.
Makes sense. And Meg, any closing thoughts on your side?
Yeah, just thank you. I think, when new hot topics come in, and no doubt AI is not just a hot topic, it's going to be something really meaningful to the market and is already. But I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact of search being still and for the foreseeable future the way that people are getting their information, and the most current and reliable one right now. Now, we know that could change quickly, but I don't think it goes away. And I think we just need to make sure, we don't abandon a focus on the thing that really gets us most of our traffic. So thank you for, helping us stay up to date on the right ways to approach it. And thank you for your expertise and sharing it with the audience today. We really appreciate you being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Meg. Appreciate it. Thanks,
yeah, David, I'm glad we were able to make this work out. And in 2 weeks, we've got another special guest. Next week, we've got off, but in 2 weeks, the CEO of Writer, May Habib, is going to be joining us from the California, San Francisco Bay Area. And she's going to be sharing what she's seeing on AI for content creation at scale. And it's really intriguing based on some early exchanges that she and I have had. So looking forward to that discussion. And I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday.